Good evening. I will now call the August 16th, 2022 meeting of the Ben Lapine School Board of Directors to order. I apologize in advance for the delay. We're starting 7 minutes behind at 5:37 because this is a pretty difficult technological feat that we are very thankful to have Hand-in-Hand Productions supporting us with. With that said, I would like to introduce our participants this evening. We have Marcus Legrand, Amy Tatum, Yanette Sari Gonzalez, Carrie McPherson Douglas, Shamiko Montgomery, Superintendent Steve Cook, Deputy Superintendent Lauren Nordquist, and Board Clerk Janet Bojanowski. And I am Melissa Barnes-Delakia, Chair of the Board. We are also joined by several members of our district leadership. We are joined by Kayla Celadon and Caitlin Oldham tonight for ASL interpretation. The work retreat is also being live streamed in Spanish to the BLS School Board YouTube page. A note for our stakeholders, we do not take public comment during our work sessions. Work sessions are an opportunity for our board to engage in discussion on key board work and initiatives. With that said, I will move into our agenda. Matt, can I have slide 2 with the objectives, please? Great. So this evening, we're going to be doing 4 different pieces of work. We're going to start out with a connecting activity based on some of the work that the Culture of Care team is doing out of High Desert Education Service District. We are then going to move into an exploration on leadership and change management. That will be a protocol-based text discussion. Finally, or third, we will work on understanding and building consensus on the goals, the strategic initiatives, and the measures that we will be working on for this coming year. And in that, we will be doing a jigsaw protocol where we will be moving from whole group to small group, whole to small, and then back to whole. So we'll be jigsawing in different configurations during that time. All of our board and district leadership have the direct links to each of those rooms that we will be having discussions in. And each of those rooms where we are having smaller group discussions are also being live streamed as well. Our 4th step will be closing out and establishing any next steps as needed. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions on our objectives for this evening. Great. Then, Matt, can we move to slide 4, which has check-in at the top? Fantastic. So sorry, I have 2 screens, so I'm reading over here, but a strong district is by definition a learning organization. And learning organizations prioritize, they promote, and they celebrate growth. And so as we embark on this next year and embark on the process of setting goals, examining the strategic initiatives and how we're going to measure this, I want to bring it back and root it in ourselves. And I want us to think about our own growth and be prepared to share the following. So I'll give us a minute to think about this. But who is someone in your life that has helped you to grow? What growth in you happened, or what was it that they supported in you? And then how did they help you to do so? So someone in your life that's helped you grow, what it was they helped you grow in, and then how they did that. Give us a quick minute to think. Okay, is there anyone who would like to start from our board?
I will start since everyone is so excited to do so. So I'm going to clichely say that the person who has helped me grow the most in my life is my husband. And I say every day how thankful I am that he is the partner I chose. When I met him, I was 19 and had not had the best home environment and didn't know how healthy relationships worked and good modes of communication. And he easily could have walked away, but instead he helped me learn to communicate, understand my emotions, understand what it was to have positive relationships with people, which ultimately allows me to be the person I am today, since I spend my entire day talking to people about their lives and relationships and communication. So yeah, I'm going to say my husband.
Thanks, Amy. Is there another board member that would like to go next?
I can go.
Great, thanks, Carrie.
There are a lot of people to choose from, but I will talk about an executive coach that I had that I was very privileged to have access to because of a fellowship. And she helped me work on primarily my strengths and weaknesses as a manager. And the primary way she helped me do that was by bookending the experience with 360-degree reviews. So at the beginning of the coaching process, everyone in my life, it felt like, provided feedback on a 360-degree review. And then we spent a year really digging into that and exploring how I showed up as a manager and how people experienced me as a manager. And then closed out the experience a year later with another 360 review. And it was intense and scary and incredibly helpful.
Thanks, Carrie. Is there another volunteer?
All right, I'll go, Melissa. How you doing? Let me see. It's hard to pick. I would say for me, it was my fraternity brothers when I was in college and I just got out of the military, and I was able to have a lot of great mentors who were in the professional world, as well as just great husbands and men in the community. And many of them to this day are still my mentors and friends because they allowed me to be able to know how to navigate not just corporate America, but the world in general. I can always pick up the phone and call them if I have advice on something. The one big piece of advice they gave me was you always got to have a mastermind group around you, people who always you can bounce things off of, but at the same time, people who can give you good feedback without, criticism. So I think I would definitely love to applaud those gentlemen and the many women who support them as well in their lives to be able to allow me to be able to have the information and stuff that I get.
Okay, Melissa, I'll go.
Okay.
I think I'm going to name my mother. My mother always told me that I could do whatever I wanted to do, and there was no reason I couldn't do anything I wanted to do. She did not have the advantages that she gave me. And while she didn't try to live my life for me, she made sure that I understood that opportunities were there to be had. And if you ignore them, you'll never be happy with yourself. So I will say my mom.
Okay, I'll go. There's so many people in my life that I learn from every day. And so I'm thinking about who is the one person that's impacted me in the biggest sense of growth, like the most transformational growth. And that's a really close friend of mine that I have here in Central Oregon that I've managed to connect with on a very deep and personal and intimate relation with this person. That's taught me how to reconnect with a lot of the cultural loss that I experienced in Central Oregon since living out here for the last 11, almost 12 years. And being able to regain a lot of the ancestral knowledge, wisdom, everything that has been carried through generations up until me and my kids. And so being able to have that ability to reconnect in a different way, that means, like I said, like sort of a bigger transformational change away from the expectation of dominant culture and going back to really understanding my sort of
place and space that I occupy in the society and the way that it functions.
Thanks, Yannette, and thanks, Carrie. Shamiko, do you want to go next or last? Because I can go.
I'll go next. I would say my parents definitely, yeah, just throughout my life, they've always had just a really high standard for who I should be and how I should be in the world. And they've always held me to that. And so it's always driven me to constantly try to grow and be better. And every time I feel like, gosh, I'm not quite reaching that, they're there to support me and help guide me. And I think that presence just throughout my life has been constant. And I'm and just so grateful to have parents that are like that and know that, like, we're gonna have a high bar for you and we're gonna know you can achieve that. And I think that's really, really important for me to continue to grow.
Awesome. Thanks, Shamiko. Mine is going to be someone, his name is John Schnur, and he founded a group called New Leaders for New Schools. But he really was responsible for my development as a leader. And I think that when I think about it, the places that he helped me grow was really deeply understanding leadership and what strong leadership looks like. And I think that he did that. And he gave me confidence, which was a huge piece. And I think that he did that because he, first of all, he bet on me. And I do use the word bet, but he bet on me. He had high expectations. He gave me tons of tools. He established a long-term relationship with me over years as I developed. And he modeled in a way that wasn't like, I'm telling you, it's let's figure this out together. What's our why together? How are we going to solve this problem? And he treated me as an equal, which really gave me a lot of confidence that I don't know that I had at the time. All right. I will say, Steve or Laura, would you like to share as our superintendent and deputy superintendent? You can say no. I'm just putting the offer out.
I'm glad to. I don't mind. I think of three people that had tremendous impact on me. And Corey Scholes was my first school designer when I became an EL principal. And she had the courage to tell me when I was absolutely being a fool. And she did it with such natural relational feedback that it didn't feel like she was insulting me. She did it in a way that made me grow internally. My second one is Dr. Kate Orozco. She was my assistant superintendent in Coeur d'Alene, but she had spent so many years. She had done 30 years of training for deep learning. And so she had such a special affinity for professional development and growth, for building capacity in a system, and just blew my mind on what she was capable of leading and how, from her position and her authority, how gently she could lead with such demand and command. And then my last one is he was an assistant soup when I was assistant soup in Douglas County. His name's Ted Knight, and he's a superintendent in California. And he was just a thought partner, having somebody that when you're like, boy, this is complex and there's not an easy answer, to just be able to talk through. Having someone that can help you learn and grow like that is just there's nothing that compares to that.
The first person who came to mind, Melissa, when you asked the question, was my dad, who was a career Army officer. But I would say that probably the opposite of any stereotype that you would think of when you thought about a career military officer, a very kind and gentle and peace-loving person. But he was a great leader. And I think about some of his leadership lessons. I think one is that you you believe in the people. He was always well loved by the troops. That, you know, he cared way more about the people who worked for him than the people he worked for. He was profoundly ethical. I mean, such a high bar of honesty and ethical behavior that I would be haunted by him forever if I made an unethical choice in my life. And then I think one of the things that was so delightful about him is that his default was to believe that the people you work with are competent and skilled and passionate about their work. And so that's the way you look at everyone else, and they would have to prove otherwise to lose that. So it wasn't having to gain his trust. His default was trust and belief in you. And I just feel like he modeled that his whole life. And those are really important things to me.
Thanks, Laura. And there are 29 people on this call right now. I would so love to hear from everybody, but we can't tonight. But I really would love to hear about people that influenced everyone on this screen in your own growth. We are going to move into a text-based discussion. It's going to go kind of fast. And this is called, Matt, if you could put 5 up, grounding, leading in a culture of change. So what you have, what I asked everybody to read is an oldie but goodie. It is an older management book, but is really about leading during times of a lot of change. And I think that it jumped out at me because of all of the change that is happening. In Ben Lapine Schools, we are a rapidly growing district. We are a district that is diversifying. We are a district that just went through a massive crisis, worldwide crisis, that bred contention in the very public arena. We in education know that the Common Core standards and the next generation science standards brought significant change to how we teach. In Oregon, the Oregon state standards and requirements are putting new pieces to schools about what the curriculum must hold. We, as schools, through our partnership, a voluntary partnership that we are so excited about with Deschutes County Health, but we are being asked, you know, our societies are asking schools not just to look at the academic growth of children, but the social and emotional growth, their mental health, their physical wellness. And so there's so much that's happening in the space of education that is a change that I wanted to look at change management, which happens to be something I love in organizational behavior. So we're going to use this protocol. I'm going to give you a minute, and I want you to think about the chapter that we read, Understanding Change. And think about these 4 A's, because this is the 4A protocol. The first is what assumptions the author, Michael Fullen, has when he wrote this. The next is, what did you agree with in the text? Third, what do you want to argue with, or what did you disagree with, or want to understand, or think, you know, maybe I don't agree with this, or I need to understand more about? And then finally, what parts of the text do you want to aspire to? And I think that when I was listening to people's share outs about the people that have influenced their own growth, I heard some of these pieces. I heard that the people held certain assumptions. I heard places where these people agreed and developed you, as well as pushed you in some areas, as well as built aspirations. And so I think that these 4 A's are ones that apply across multiple contexts. And so if you could take a moment to think about the text, you can get some think time, and then we're going to do 4 rounds of the assumptions, agreements, challenges or arguments, and then aspirations. So let's take 2 minutes right now. Let's take 3, so that'll take us exactly to 6. to consider those, and then we'll share out. Does that sound, is that clear? And whenever you can, like we do in our classrooms, if you would like to quote any text, you can do that as well. Okay. All right. I'm coming back at 6 to start our first round. All right, I'm going to bring us back. And I'm going to start with a quick, and this will just be a popcorn, anyone can chime in, but any assumptions that you feel Michael Fullen holds in this chapter?
That change management is an art, not a science.
I would
So you
say,
said,
oh, go ahead.
you say we're answering question 1, right? Correct?
Yep, just assumptions. What assumptions are in this article? So one is that it's a part.
Similar to what Carrie said, but it's like change is not innovation, it's for innovativeness. You know, you got to be innovative in the way we do change.
I would say that there's a pretty strong assumption here that change is better done or better accomplished through collaborative work and broad-based work than top-down. The assumptions is the hardest round.
Yeah, I think you're right, Melissa. The complexity of any element of change implies that one size of strategy does not fit all, and that recognizing the best way to get to the change that will actually make a difference in the organization is probably the key to being able to use the skills that you have.
I think one of the assumptions that he talks about the different types of leader, the 6 different types of leader, almost as discrete packages that you fall into a category that you live in kind of without dynamics. And I think it's probably shiftier than that and changes as indicated by what the system needs, or maybe just what kind of day you're having as a leader.
Absolutely. So important. Okay, let's shift into agree. Where in this chapter were things that you agreed with?
So I will say the point that I agreed with the most and immediately identified with was talking about pacemakers being one of the bad types of leaders that led to burnout. I worked for an organization where there was constant change, constant new projects, but nothing was ever followed through. And we never actually saw anything that we were working towards come to fruition because there would just be another shiny object we were chasing after. And it led to a lot of burnout.
Yeah, I really connected to that idea as well of leading in a culture of change means creating a culture, not just a structure. And that when you're just constantly creating new structures, that does lead to burnout, and for a good reason. It's like, what's the new thing we're supposed to do?
One of the statements sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the statements I agreed with was that I just wrote the quotation down. Our most critical role at the central office is to support learning about learning.
I loved that one too, Laura. I also gravitated towards the description of the leadership styles and the statement that leaders who have mastered 4 or more, especially the authoritative, democratic, affiliative, and coaching styles, have the best climate and business performance. And that is a really hard thing to do.
And Melissa, one of the other things I agree with as well is there was 2 things. One is the component of relationship building. I think we have forgotten how to do that a lot here in our business of education. We forgot to build relationships that are meaningful and that allow us to be able to get a lot of things done. I think we need to really get back to that. He talks about that a little bit as well, especially about knowledge of self. And David, to help you to determine to get some of your things done. But the other piece, when you, like Carrie was talking about how you would look at different leaders, the one statement I agree with is about the authoritarian leaders or authoritarian leaders, need to recognize the weakness as a strength in their approach is one of the key pieces, right? I think we have a tendency to say what happened is this is the way it's going to go. and this is what I'm going to do, and this is where it's going to go from there. And you need to understand that we need to develop and look a little bit deeper in how we can continue to make sure that we look at our weaknesses as well as our strengths.
The statement I agreed with kind of ties into that. I think it's related, and it isn't in any one descriptor, but it's overall the constant need to cultivate and refine our skills, and whatever sort of defines us as a leader is just that consistent. And it even says here mindset, that growth mindset, that, you know, we may have learned this approach and it worked for this point in time in whatever situation we're in, but the intention of continuing and expanding and molding and crafting it to refine it into something better.
Yes, one of the things that I found over and over again in my experience is the recognition of the implementation dip. So you start out, you're feeling really good about where you're going. You've worked the best way you can to build the relationships, to bring people along, to explain and communicate the goals and so on. And it seems to be working for a while. And then you get a brick wall, whether it's a person, whether it's internal or external. And that implementation dip kind of goes, wait a minute, I don't really understand. So, you know, I'm with you, but I don't really understand what it means for me and my role. I have seen that over and over again. And as an external consultant, I also agree that I felt very good sometimes about the work I was doing with groups of teachers and administrators in school districts all over the country. But I also knew that when I left, I wasn't sure whether or not that would continue, the work that the training and the work that we were doing. In some cases it did, and in other cases it just went away when the outside consultants left. I haven't thought too much about that, but that really is one of the hazards, I think, of using external consultants and forces.
Thanks. I think I have this one sentence about reculturing and the reculturing for which we strive, one that activates and deepens moral purpose through collaborative work cultures that respect differences and constantly build and test knowledge against measurable results, a culture within which one realizes that sometimes being off balance is a learning environment. And I really appreciated that. I think because I think I have an assumption that anyone who's in education has a deep moral purpose about improving the lives of our youth, and I deeply believe in collaborative work structures, and so just that piece and understanding that, like, true what can feel collaborative. Sometimes we have to test ourselves on that. And is it collaborative, or are we just kind of hearing the voices we want to hear and just really, you know, pushing and testing that piece around differences? And, you know, the whole section about resistance and redefining resistance, and that when we have change, it's not always comfortable. And so, you know, and you can feel kind of off balance. And so I just think that piece is a really strong reminder that the thing that gets you through those periods of unbalance is that collaboration and that common purpose. I'm going to shift us to things you might disagree with. And if there's anything we disagree with from the text, or argue, or need to understand more.
I so want to go first on this one. Mine isn't a disagreement as much as if Michael Fullen would have wrote this book, the exact same book, today. He talks about on page 42, he talks about the politics of implementation. And I think in our district, the politics of implementation are an enormous issue across the district in many, many ways. In fact, I would guess many of our policies are completely unknown to some folks, and that there's a level of expectation that lives with those policies. And I would love to know more about what he means by the politics of implementation, because he says it in a turn of a phrase, and I think it's really mostly what we're struggling with nationally right now, how we tend to fight back under the table rather than overt and in front. And we just choose not to do what was asked of us and wait to be caught, and then beg for forgiveness if we do get caught, because the likelihood of us all getting caught when most of us are in that kind of mindset, or this kind of, I don't know, two worlds right now in the way we're approaching things, that really struck me and really ran me down a rabbit hole.
I think I kind of disagree with, I felt like he was sort of poo-pooing checklists and plans, and he had the phrase "never a checklist, always complexity." And while I full-heartedly agree that nothing is ever going to go as planned, and then yes, it will always be complex, it's also a really bad idea not to learn from all the research that has been done about change management and not to have a plan. I think a lot of people that have failed change management efforts, if you really went back and studied it, they probably didn't have all of the parts of the plan thought out and executed well. And I just think, what's the 8 Ps, the like proper planning prevents what, I forget what it is. But anyway, that's my disagreement. Still have a plan. Utilize the checklist.
For me, my not that I want to argue with him, but I really would love for him to redefine the 6 types of leaders, because I think they've shifted a lot. Because I disagree with him on some of these pieces, especially with the Democratic. You can rename those or rechange some things and redefine what it look like based on what the current environment we are in terms of education. Because I think personally also I would put these in different order too. I think that'd be critical, because I think coaching and the leader that builds harmony and emotional bonds and stuff like this, that they need to go to the top in terms of the authoritative one, like I said, or coercion. I think they need to basically be changed and shifted around. I think we need to change those, because language means everything. And that's what I would definitely argue with.
Yeah, I would say the 2 pieces for me, one was the current context. And one of the things I thought about with the change piece is that tension between a lot is changing, and at the same time, there are things that just are changing too slowly and haven't changed and need to change. And so that was a little bit of a tension for me. For sure. And then I also, like Carrie, had a little bit of checklist. I'm like, but I'm all about goals, actions, goals, actions, and measures. And so and having that structure. And I do think he says structures are okay. They just can't be the whole thing. But I do think like those guardrails, I want to make sure not to have a piece that I say, let's all read this together right before we talk about actually having a plan. And a checklist. So yeah, that was a little bit of a tension for me too. Would people like to share anything they aspire to? I'll start. I I think through all of these examples, something that came through to me was how important it is to have widespread leadership. And so something I aspire to in my role as a board member and board chair and human being is really honoring, developing, and celebrating the leadership of others. And so understanding that there's this imbalance that happens when things are changing, being able to really, and it's somewhere else in the book, or maybe it's in Senge's, but celebrating the wins, right? Especially with that implementation dip piece, and just really recognizing contributions and celebrating wins. I just think that those two pieces are essential and something I'm always aspiring to do.
I have a theme tonight around leadership, so I'll just stick with it. I think I'm always aspiring to be a better leader, not just as a manager at my job, but also as a mother, and kind of all the informal ways that we lead to be a balance of all those leadership styles. Although I agree with Marcus, they could use probably some updating and revisions, but generally trying to aspire to be a better mix of leadership styles.
For me, what I'm inspired to do is what it talks about reculturing, right? Is the name of the game. We're in a culture shift within our district. The culture is shifting, the education, what we do education is shifting. Like Melissa mentioned at the beginning, that was the piece he talked about. And I think ultimately this, to summarize what he talked about in terms of the reculturing is don't mistake a movement as progress. And that's what we got to look at, right? Because we've not progressed forward in so many different ways. Because many of the issues and concerns we had happened before the pandemic, and we never fixed a lot of them. So we have to reculture and look at the way we shift, not only mentally, but physically, and how we do processes as well. So that's the thing I'm inspiring to do, to continue to hopefully push this district that way.
Yeah, I want to thank you for that comment, Marcus, because I think that is something we should all be aspiring to. The pandemic has been incredibly traumatic and is still ongoing. And one of the things that I had really hoped we would learn as a district was where education was failing some students and where others were succeeding. And those that were failed by traditional education, that we could learn lessons from the pandemic to help improve our systems. And I was really hoping we weren't going to rush back to normal. And I feel like there has in some ways been a rush back to normal. So as we talk about making change and making future progress and these leadership styles, I hope we can remember that there are big changes that need to be made, and we need to make sure we're looking at all of our students, especially the ones who have traditionally not been served well in our schools, and also the physical design of our schools. I was reading something from an education, a teacher, about designs of classrooms, and she had an obese student who didn't come to class because there was nowhere for them to sit. And are all of our spaces inclusive just in their physical design? Like, there is so much that we need to think about when we think about how our schools are serving our students.
Great, thank you. I am going to have us not discuss now, because I'm watching my time, but rather hold this last thought in mind as we think about this reading and as we enter these groups of what does this mean when we're thinking about our leadership for our work as a board on behalf of our students. So that's something I hope we think about throughout these sessions, but I'm going to actually shift us now into our next session. And just so folks know, the good part about using an oldie but goodie, here's the actual book, is that it's free. And you can look it up in ERIC and you can get a whole free copy of it, which is what I sent you. So no copyright, nothing was violated. All right, so we will now move into what the core of this meeting is going to be. Matt, can we go to slide 6, exploration? We're going to go into groups. And we have 4 groups that will be happening today. One is on academic excellence. One is on passion, purpose, and plan for our futures, for the future. One is on engagement, well-being, inclusion, and belonging. And one is on organizational strength. So it's the 4 reworked board goals. What you'll be doing in these groups is you will be partnered with another board member. I'm partnered with Steve. And you will go and you will meet for 20 minutes with experts from our district leadership on whichever topic you've been assigned. So if you're going to learn about passion, purpose, and plan for the future, you're going to have Katie, Stephen, Jennifer, Dean, and 2 board members, for example. They're going to present to you about that goal area, what they're proposing as strategic initiatives for the coming year, and the measures by which that work is done. You're going to have the opportunity to really hear that, understand it, ask questions, and push. Okay, so you want to develop your understanding, but you also want to think like, are there assumptions here? Are there things I agree with? Are there things that I argue with? Are there things that make me want us to aspire to this? But going into those, 20 minutes, so they'll do a 15-minute presentation, then you'll have 5 minutes to ask questions and dive in deeply. But at the end, I want you to be able to think about a sentence, a phrase, and then finally just a word that would summarize your takeaways for that goal. So like a sentence, a phrase, a word. You're going to do that once. Then you and your partner, so Steve and I will move to our second group. We will be in a new group with different experts. You're going to repeat that process. 15 minutes, they will give you inputs, 5 minutes of asking questions, and then thinking about a sentence, a phrase, a word that would summarize that goal area. So you'll become an expert in 2. Third round, one of you from your original group, will be paired with one other person on one of the goal areas. So Steve and I would split. And now perhaps I think Steve is with Carrie and I'm with Marcus. And we're going to dive into one of the areas that we had in common. It'll be assigned. And then we're going to talk for 10 minutes about what we think the full board needs to really understand about this goal and what's been presented. And we're going to summarize that. We can have a larger discussion, but we're going to be able to share out that sentence, that phrase, and that word that you've just agreed on that really describes the area. But then you will also be able to talk about your fuller understanding, and you'll present that to the rest of us. And then we will open up to a full group discussion. That is very confusing. That is a lot of jigsawing. This is much easier in person, but I think it's really important. And we do jigsaws for a reason, and that's to allow people to become experts and to force us to learn from each other. So it's a balance between you becoming experts in 2 of the groups and then also having to teach one of the groups to the rest of us. Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
Just to clarify, after the 20 minutes, would you like everybody to come back here for a check-in before going to their next room?
Yes. So you should have the Outlook message that Janet sent to you. And each time, because we're live streaming this, we can't do things like Zoom, just a traditional Zoom. So you will move out of this main room and go to your breakout room. It is a different link. So you will leave this meeting, join the next. After 20 minutes, you will leave that meeting, come back to this one. And so it's a little bit clunky, but in order to stream this all for the public, it's the way that we have to do it because we have to have 5 different streams going. Again, thank you, Hand in Hand Productions, for figuring this out with us. All right. Okay, then we are going to go to our first rooms. You have your links there for round 1 with Shamiko and Shirley going to academic excellence, Marcus and Carrie to passion, purpose, and plan, Yanette and Amy to engagement, and Steve and I to operations. See you there. I probably should have said that first. And so we are going to start with our academic excellence group. And that will be Shirley and Amy.
Shirley, you don't want to talk? I feel like you summed it up very eloquently in our group, but I can sum it up if you want.
Please do.
Okay. So a lot of what we talked about in this group are things that we've heard regularly at board meetings over the year. So nothing felt like too big of a surprise, but all really important work. So we reviewed foundational literacy skills. Sorry, background noise. And we went through, how there's the importance of finding technical literacy and also comprehension and finding the balance between those two as we teach our students. We talked about equitable grading practices and how this is essentially creating the same expectations in every classroom. So a student doesn't enter math class versus science class, and the expectations are different based on what the teacher has decided, and it removes biases. Ideally, that grades will accurately reflect performance, that there's transparency in communications. This should be bias resistant and also motivational, because grades aren't to demotivate, they are to help students show that they have learned and to value learning over simply the collection of points. The other point that Dave Van Loo made that I was really struck by, that I hadn't thought about when I thought about equitable grading, was that it is also better for students' mental health, simply because there are those clear expectations. And the first group I was in, we were talking obviously about mental health, and I felt like tying grading practices to mental health is a good kind of follow through with where we want education to go and the experiences we want our students to have. We also talked about longer term initiatives and instructional strategies, 5 of them. And if I mess any of these up, please jump in, because I was taking notes very quickly. That there are clear learning intentions, evidence of learning, feedback on the learning, leveraging of peers, and student ownership of work. We talked about the work we're going through with language arts adoption and how consequential this is, particularly at the elementary level, since language arts is kind of the foundation of elementary school in a lot of ways. And then looking forward to the new social studies standards and how our district has hired a TOSA that will be spending the next 2 years working on how we implement this in our district. And that is also very exciting work. So Shirley and I being asked to come up with a sentence. We came up with, we are undergoing, sorry, I couldn't read a word. We are undergoing a culture change and content change for students and staff to create a culture of learning. In terms of a phrase, a major change for everyone throughout the system. And the word is learning. And as I said to this group earlier, that I had hoped we would take the opportunity of the pandemic to think about how we educate our students and not just jump back into the same old normal, because we know that didn't work for a lot of students. After having this conversation and debriefing, I said to the group, I have to take that comment back that I said in the beginning, because I actually think the work we're doing is completely changing how we've educated our students. And I think we are coming to a system that will be better and that won't continue, hopefully, to fail the students we know we have failed in the past.
The only thing I'd add, Amy, is that we recognize that the last years have been very difficult, and staff has possibly slipped kind of back into some old practices. And that is not our expectation anymore. So we have to stay the course that it's what our kids need. It's not what our staff needs. It's what our kids need. And we know we have the staff to produce that. So it's the support and the knowledge and the tools to make that instruction everything we want it to be.
Yes, and I will push only a little, because as I said, when we were talking about, seeing some educators going back to the same things that they've done that we know don't serve students well. And I made the point that the last 2 years have been incredibly traumatic for all of us. And, that trauma response is real, and how those stress hormones affect our brain and impede our ability to learn as adults as well, right? And I never want to be in a place when we know around our country educators are being devalued and they don't feel like they have the respect they deserve, for it ever to be put in a place where we're not saying, we know this change is hard and we value your mental health and how important you are as adults in the system. And we're creating a culture of wellness for everyone in our building, including our adults. And I appreciated Sean, and I know hopefully you guys will talk about this, the mental health partnership that we have now, where if someone needs access to mental health resources, we can help connect them to services. And hopefully our adults in the system take advantage of that, because this couple of years has been really stressful, and coming out of it, it's not any less stressful. It's just a matter of, have we processed the stress and have we processed the grief of all the losses we've experienced, so that we can continue to serve our students and serve ourselves and our families.
Thanks so much. We are going to move to our group 2, Passion, Purpose, and Plan, with Marcus and Steve.
Well, I'm going to speak first and try to cover the majority of this. I think Marcus has got a little bit of a headache, and so I'll get going. So our group was Passion, Purpose, and Plan, and spent a lot of time investigating the synthesis of the career readiness with kind of our life goals, which is synthesizing the social emotional learning components with our career readiness. And I think right now the draft title of this new document is Life and Career Readiness. And it builds both of those into kind of a common concept, with a concept map that maps like a river through grades K through 12 on how we're preparing kids to be ready for life after graduation. And that was a lot of great conversation, understanding what it means for students to learn as a kindergartner, what is it that I could be, learning those jobs, and what are jobs and what do they mean, and how do you participate in them as first graders, second graders, and then what are my talents, my skills, and walking students through that. This draft would become kind of our vision for how we would administer this across the district, K through 12. We're not there yet. This would be kind of the driver for what would be the next steps, which might include getting resources to support this and providing training and capacity in the system, so that we could have a almost consistent set of expectations across the district and all of the schools. And this is there are structures already that exist in the middle schools that could support this through advisory. We would need the resources. And so we're starting to look at what that might look like, and getting feedback from the community, getting feedback from stakeholders, including our teachers. What would it look like to provide that support? And additionally, what would our students want to know? This is one of those areas in the Youth Truth Survey where they tell us we just are not coming out of our system feeling like we know what's available to us. And so that was the very first and really high priority. And Stephen used a term that I think is a really cool term for us to think about. It's providing students with a limitless future. And what does that mean regarding their individual pathway? The second thing we spent a little bit of time talking about was the idea of a full option graduate, and taking it beyond just like an honors graduate program. What would it look like to be able to provide multiple access points, whether it's through using IB or AP exams or career tech ed pathways, as a supplement to their high school diplomas, so that when they're finished, it isn't just a high school diploma, but it's a high school diploma, and getting them to recognize that there is so much more opportunity through that experience as they were to leave their high school. And I think the support, we spent a lot of time talking about what's already in place to support those works. We've increased the amount of resources for school to career coordinators. We're also hiring a second internship coordinator. We've added a lead counselor to help coordinate the work with school to career work that's happening in the school to career centers or the future centers, and developing lessons so that we can start to provide that resource to students. We also, I think the ESD has provided career trees for counselors to start talking with students about what their options are as they start to enter high school and what skills they would need academically that leads them into a pathway for what career interest and what capacities they might have after graduation. And Marcus gave us a really good sentence. I think the sentence that we had was, the district is in the process of providing and ensuring success for all students after graduation. And then we had two phrases, full option graduation and life and career development. And our single word was progressing. And I don't know if Marcus can even participate, but I'm glad to have any of my experts or Marcus add to something if I've failed to mention it.
Great. Thank you, Steve and Marcus. We will now move to group number 3, which is on engagement, wellness, inclusion, and belonging. And that is Yanette and Shamika.
Great. I'll try to summarize. Putting links on most of the bullet points that I'm about to cover in a document that they shared. So if the board members are interested, I can send you those links. The engagement piece and the things that they're doing to improve in those areas. And one is that the district just hired the Center for Educational Leadership to really focus on improving student voice within our schools, which is phenomenal. And then having those consultants work with our leaders, but then also work with our schools to gather more qualitative data to better understand how we're doing. The other piece, as they're expanding the family engagement team, which is phenomenal. That team is really made up of our family liaisons, and expanding them so that our liaisons for different liaison is starting. So those sort of liaisons for our communities is really important, and expanding those is wonderful. There's a growing effort for establishing community partnerships and in leaning into those and valuing those.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was me or Shamika. Yeah, I think we just lost her. Oh, no, she's back.
Shamiko, maybe turn off your video and that will help save bandwidth so we can hear you.
How is it now? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened. My internet kind of crashed for a minute and now I'm back. Do you want me to pick up or did someone else pick up for me?
No, you can pick up.
Oh, okay, great. And I ended the community partnership piece a little too early. The community partnership piece is really there's I mean, there's dozens of community partnerships that exist with various community groups and organizations to build those connections. Another piece that they talked about was the bias incident reporting, and they gave a great document to talk about kind of all the different things that have been implemented and all the phases that they've been in. So the bias incident reporting is up, so we'll start getting that data, I think this year. Is that right, Sean? Is that the first year that we'll have that data?
For the bias incident reporting?
Yes.
I think we have some data from last year too, Kinsey, but yeah, we will be collecting data this year as well.
Okay, wonderful. And it's something that we talked about was how are we measuring all of these pieces and what are the benchmarks? And so something that they had talked about is, because this is a new system in place, that you know, rather than seeing the numbers go down, is what they want to be seeing is that the numbers are increasing, because this is a new system in place for people to be reporting those bias incidents. So as these years go on, we expand that piece, we're looking to see those numbers increase, because that means people are actually utilizing this reporting system. And then accompanying that piece is all of the training aspects that come with it, in changing all of our, moving our policies into practice, so that when those incidents are reported, that we're handling those incidents as well. So that was an interesting component to know that, you know, how do we measure these is a big thing for me. So just to keep this particular piece in mind, that it will increase before it does go down. And then just touching on what Amy was mentioning, there's a lot of mental health pieces and support pieces that the district is providing. So one of them is that Deschutes County Health Partnership, that Healthy Schools projects that's happening. But then also continuing expansion on the tier 2, tier 3 student support piece that we've had in place. And I'm sure if you are all parents in the district, like, you know how wonderful these extra staff members in the schools are influencing outcomes. What other pieces I'm missing? And then the suicide prevention piece is a huge one, and those mental health supports based on those partnerships. And so I'm trying to summarize all of these pieces. And if I had to kind of use a few words to kind of capture all of the work that's being done, it's building on those partnerships, leaning into those, in the relationship piece, not just with our students and with our families, with utilizing these liaisons, but through other organizations who are doing great work, and partnering with them in those, in making these projects successful. What am I missing?
I think you covered it all perfectly, Shamika. The only thing I would add, because it stuck out to me because I asked the question, is how are we empowering these liaisons to bring this feedback back, and how does that inform the work or the changes that are being made in the district? Because I think we can all agree that we can all form committees and advisory groups, et cetera. But if we are not giving agency and power and sharing that power with those folks that are leading that work, then it really is just a performative measure that we're taking. And so when we talk about family engagement specifically, being able to invite not just individuals that are tied to known organizations, but actual parents in our district with children who are undergoing the barriers and the challenges and the experiences that have not been positive for them, it's important for me as a board member to know that we are giving that power to those liaisons to say, here's what I'm hearing, here's what this is what the community is asking for, this is what this specific parent, requested. How do we implement this in the changes that we're trying to affect across the district?
Thanks, Jeanette. Thank you, Shamiko. All right, group 4, operations. It was a lot. If you've seen that document, there's a million different sections. Carrie, do you want to do part? No.
You go for it. I will fill in at the end.
Okay. So operations is massive. We started out with policies and really highlighting our policy work, which has built transparency and a new eye on policy. And then one of the things that we talked about was just making sure that we also build systems now that we have the systems for our policies to be consistently reviewed and updated, ways to make sure that we're also looking at consistent implementation of our policies. Within staff, a huge focus was on HR and really building the HR system that we didn't have previously so that we can actually track data about our staff. One place that we talked about, in addition to all the great work that's happening to capture the data around HR, was really also wanting to understand a little bit more HR from the perspective of it as a tool for development of our staff. And so that piece was a little bit absent from the document. We talked about finance and really about how we're adding pieces into our budget reports so that we can better link how our funding and how our funding of different parts of our budget is in support of our goals and the core work of the district. So we've started to do that with a narrative in the budget reports, but continuing to do that. And also the fact that we feel like we need to have a high level, the team would like to have a high level discussion on an annual basis around reserves, so that people and the board and the community understand the purpose of reserves, and how we use them. We went into facilities and really talking because we've are putting out a bond about the work that the bond would enable us to do in a cycle of continuous maintenance and improvement of our facilities so that they're fabulous places of learning for our kids. Talked about transportation and really the work, the core work is service. It's service to our students and our families, and that our electric bus will finally be here supposedly in November. Woo! It's been a long time coming, but the good news is it'll come during the worst time of the year. So we'll really be able to see how an electric bus does in the winter in Bend, Oregon and LaPine. LaPine's going to be harder. In the nutrition, really the focus was getting back to what we did before. Our meals have been going out quite a bit. Things have been different. We've been doing free meals for all. And so adjusting back to the pre-pandemic in terms of the funding revenue. And something is that when families are curious about the nutritional value of our meals, there is an app called NutriSlice, and you can look up any of the meals that our kids are eating. With safety, that obviously has been a focus. We just heard a safety presentation. And so that work continues. And it continues around consistency of implementation. And then communication, we talked about the focus being that it's early, that it's often, and that it's understandable across all of our different types of stakeholders. And so, and that we are working this year on really building capacity so that we have consistency in that. Overall, with our operations, there was a very strong focus on continuing to build out systems and processes to do the work well. There was a consistent theme that every single one of these operations is there because it's in service of kids and that our stakeholders are our clients. So our students and our families are our clients. There was also a theme of consistency and implementation across all of these different pieces. And then the idea of continuous improvement. So my crazy sentence is, our operations across all sectors are in service of our students. Therefore, we are building systems and processes to ensure consistency of implementation and continuous improvement. That's a mouthful. And then our word is really two. I'm going to blame Carrie on this, but our word is continuous improvement. And I will just highlight here because I think it's pretty interesting across our four groups. the words were learning, progressing, building, and continuous improvement. So I think we all walked away with really similar key takeaways in each of these focal areas. So I was going to have a bigger discussion at the end, but we are 1 minute away from time, and this is a two-part board retreat. So we will consider right now the input level. You have each other to reach out to if you have further questions. And then we have the documents that have been sent out. What I am proposing at this point are two things. The first is that we do a small revision on wording of the 4 board goals that the cabinet has made, has revised our goals. So hopefully in this process, you've seen how the equity strand has been taken all the way through, and there are equity commitments in each of the 4 goals. So that would take the equity goal out, and it comes to life in all the 4 areas of work. And then engagement, inclusion, and belonging are combined in that goal. What I would propose is that we take those 4 and we put it out for feedback. So we put it on our policy page because it would be a change if we adopt the revised goals, but also that we get feedback on the wording and making sure that the wording is right from our board as well during that review process, so that we can come back with a document at our September board meeting that we could adopt for the next school year. So that's my first proposal. Does that sound okay? Yeah.
Sounds
Okay.
great. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we will do that, and I will give us a day, Janet Bojanowski, if we could have that up by as soon as possible, but no later than the end of the week. And then the feedback period will be open until August 30th, so that we can have any comments, but this really is the board work. So it is up to us to adopt it. And then second would be a direction to the superintendent to continue to get feedback. What I heard in my 2 groups was feedback from stakeholders. And so the direction would be to be able to, 1, complete the audit of our practices so that we have the data. This is already in plans, but that the comprehensive audit that will be happening of our system will give us additional data. And then 2, so that would be go get data from an external expert, and 2, start to plan for getting data from our stakeholders. We're entering the period of planning for our next excellence and equity review. So then the second charge would be to begin the work of those focus groups and with community involvement to provide the input on our goals, so that we know that we're headed in the right direction and identifying gaps or overlaps. Steve, does that sound clear? Awesome. Board members, is that okay? All right. 2.5 hours virtual board retreat. I'm going to end with appreciations. If anyone else has an appreciation to share, they're welcome to share. But I need to send out a huge appreciation to Hand in Hand Productions and Matt Hand for doing all of this and doing the breakout rooms and figuring out how we could do it in compliance with law, which required open meeting law, which required us to have 5 different streams. So huge thank you to him and to his team. And then a huge appreciation to Janet Bojanowski, who worked with me and helped think about all of this with Matt, and then put together that very detailed playbook of where to go when. And then finally, to all of the members of our leadership team, I know that work sessions and board retreats put more on your plate, and I cannot understate the value it is for us as board members to be able to hear from you as experts in your field about the work of our district. So thank you for being with us tonight. Any other appreciations?
I would just like to double down on that one, Melissa. It's a really busy time for this team, and I just am grateful for everybody spent all day in training, and we're going to jump right back into training tomorrow. And it's like, it's a busy time. And so I'm very grateful for everybody's participation and just bringing their expertise to this group. Thank you.
Yeah, and Melissa, I will add an appreciation to piggyback off of Dr. Cook, appreciating the leaders who are with us this evening, and also all of the educators who are at home tonight, hopefully enjoying some rest before the new year starts. And this retreat has definitely taught me how much change is underway, and I know how stressful that change is. And hopefully they don't feel like it's the pace setting leadership style, but rather it is working for continuous change to improve outcomes for all of us. So I am very appreciative for all the adults doing the work. And I hope everyone, enjoys this last few weeks before we're all back in the classroom again.
All right. There are no further appreciations. Our next regular school board business meeting is scheduled for September 13th, 2022. And with that said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you.